This video is brought to you by Nvidia and Inno3D, the hardware that allows you to take advantage of DLSS when playing Outriders. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more about how Inno3D's next generation GPUs will transform the way you play. I am not here to tell you that Outriders is amazing. Definitely not. There's a lot of reasons to dislike this game, and a lot of people do dislike this game. Intensely. If you take a look at the coverage on YouTube, in the press, on Reddit, on forums, whatever, you'll see that this is plenty polarizing, with more than a fair chunk of people declaring Outriders bland, recycled, derivative, clunky, and uninspired. Here's the thing, right? I think a lot of that is fair. There's quite a few things that I look at in this package and I'm like, I don't know about that. But for me, Outriders is putting in the work where it matters in the looter shooter genre. And it's doing it in a way that very few looter shooters, or looters in general, have done. I think the central through line of Outriders is that it exists as a response to the worst aspects of the looter shooter genre. This is a genre that typically has no story, or it's really pushed to the background. Outriders has a story, and it's really front and center, even if it's quite cringe. This genre is typically built around the live service model, propped up by microtransactions. Outriders is not a live service, and it has no microtransactions. Most looter shooters don't get you to properly engage the loot aspect of the game until the campaign is finished. In Outriders, you are immediately making meaningful decisions about your build because even low-level gear has completely game-changing perks that alter your playstyle. This is a genre that fiercely protects that feeling of power, cordoning it off until you reach deep into the endgame so as to incentivize you to keep grinding. In Outriders, you immediately feel like this whirlwind of destruction, and that feeling is only amplified if you play with other people, as your ability synergies are just crazy. So there's a lot to hate in this package, yes, definitely. The story is bad-ish, the level design is terrible, the performance on PC is not good, the camera shake and motion blur, wow, what the fuck, man, what the hell were they thinking with that? There's definitely a lot of issues here, but bottom line, as a fan of the looter shooter genre, this game is ticking boxes for me. Plus, this is the first looter beta that I've walked out of, and I haven't felt the need to like ring the alarm bell. So yeah, so far, I'm on board. Outriders' story and world is a lot. It's a lot. You play an Outrider, an elite soldier person who was frozen in cryosleep while the world around you went to shit. 30 years on ice, you wake up ready to kick ass, only to realize that your ass-kicking potential has significantly increased because you're now altered. A superhuman capable of leveling entire platoons with your elemental-based superpowers. Most of these altered are selfish assholes that generally don't give a shit about humanity, but you've only just woken up and you haven't been peer pressured by your altered buddies into that lifestyle yet, so for now you're gonna help out humanity and see how all that goes. So right from the get-go, it's clear that Outriders is doing the story thing in a way that other looters don't. Destiny, Warframe, The Division, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, these are all games that have a story, but it's not the focus of the experience. You have to dig to find it like in Destiny, or it comes in spurts like in Warframe, or it just doesn't exist at all like in The Division. Outriders is like, no, we have a story, whether you like it or not. This means that you can expect a lot of cutscenes, in fact, maybe too many. The demo was the full prologue and opening act of the game, and you really couldn't go more than a few minutes without some sort of cutscene kicking in. More story is definitely an admirable goal in this genre, but if this opening section is anything to go by, it looks as though people can fly overshot the mark a little. Then there's the issue of the story itself, which sort of feels like if Zack Snyder were to do a remake of Avatar, replacing all the blue people with Superman and all the colors with brown. The story is very schlocky, B-grade sci-fi, like the Mortal Kombat movie, or Highlander, or The Chronicles of Riddick. Actually, yes, that is what it is, it's The Chronicles of Riddick, the movie, which was shit, not the video game, which was awesome. Every character you meet here is like, I'm a fucking badass, don't get in my way. And the main character just runs around executing everybody. I mean, look at this.
Whose orders? Barker, he runs the Hounds gang. He's trying to take out all the vendors in Rift Town. It won't work for him.
Worse than all of this, though, is the way that all of these scenes are shot. Oh my god. Okay, check this out.
What's on your mind, boss? I know that look you get.
Did you see that? This is just two dudes casually talking in a sunny prairie, but still for some reason the cinematics director felt the need to do aggressive camera shake as though they were in the middle of some battlefield pinned down under enemy fire. Every single scene is like this. Every scene feels like it was shot on an iPhone attached to the end of a vibrator. It's crazy, and it really just makes these scenes painful to watch. It's like, dude, relax. Just put the camera on a tripod. It's fine. Story is baked so deeply into the Outriders experience that it does get in the way sometimes. For example, repeating quests is a thing you can do if you want to farm gear, or just because you enjoy the quest. Right now, if you want to repeat a quest, you have to go through a cutscene every single time. There's no way to skip it and just go straight to the quest itself. I found this really weakened and cheapened what story is there, as you spend so much time just spamming the spacebar to get through these cutscenes because you've seen them 20 times already. When it comes to the final game, I'll certainly be interested to see whether this investment in story hinders the endgame experience rather than helps it. So, do I look forward to experiencing around 35 hours of this edgy, grimdark, cutscene-laden, shaky camera storytelling? Not so much. I don't hate it as much as a lot of other people do, but I don't love it. I do respect the effort though. I respect them willing to go all in like this because this is a genre that's typically too scared to try and tell stories at all. For some, the way this story is being handled is already enough to kind of piece out of the game. Fair enough. Personally, I'm keeping an open mind to see how it all comes together in the final product. Okay, so I played this on a PC, on an RTX 3080 and an AMD 5950X CPU, so pretty powerful rig. I played it at 1440p ultra settings. Sadly, performance was not great. So there's really two frame rates that this game runs at. There's the city frame rate, which is awful, and then there's the actual gameplay frame rate, which is for some reason way better. So in the city, I was struggling to stay at 60 FPS with wild swings as low as 30 FPS, depending on whether or not I was turning corners or what I was looking at. In the broader world, when I'm out on a mission, frame rates are generally much better, typically hovering at around 100 frames and never really dipping below 60. It's important to remember though that my rig is pretty crazy and even I couldn't get a steady frame rate. Looking at commentary across the internet, it's clear that people are having a lot of issues getting this to run well on their PCs, and console performance is also reported to be quite shaky as well. The bigger issue for me were the crashes. I had multiple hard crashes whilst playing, two of which forced me to restart my PC. I play with some friends as well and they experienced the same thing, crashes requiring restarts. It happened regularly enough for us to be like, yeah, okay, this is kind of a problem. There were numerous audio mix and audio sync issues. Sometimes character dialogue would be extremely quiet, or it would be completely out of sync with events on screen. This happened across multiple cutscenes, so it's looking like a game-wide problem. Matchmaking is currently broken. Now, usually I'd be like, well, I'm sure they'll fix it before launch, but the Avengers matchmaking was broken during its beta, and it was still broken like 3 or 4 weeks after launch, so we can't assume it will be fixed. We just have to watch this space because right now it is balked. One of the biggest challenges the game faces currently are its PC options. So DLSS is enabled by default here, and there's actually no option to disable it in-game. You have to go to the config file to do that, which almost no people are going to do. The game boots by default in DirectX 11, but you can force boot it into DirectX 12, which many are claiming gives a significant performance boost. Again, there's currently no in-game option to do that. The real killer though is the motion blur. Okay, let's just pause for a second. Developers, stop forcing motion blur. We hate it. We hate it. Everyone hates it. Just stop doing it. Or if you're going to do it, by God, give us an option to turn it off. Anyway, you can't turn off the motion blur in-game here, and it's almost as egregious as it was in the Avengers. The developers have said that we're going to be able to turn it off at some point, but it's not clear when. Now, we've been through demo, beta things before, and one truth remains constant. A lot of what I've described isn't going to change substantially in the next 30 days before this game launches. It might change in the next 60 days, the next 90 days, but what we see here is most likely what we are going to get on April 1st when the game launches. So for this reason, I'm of a view that it's best to hold your cash until reviews are out and the final state of the game is confirmed, because we've all been burned too many times and there's clearly some problems here that need to be addressed. Anyway, I spent a lot of time talking about what I don't like or what doesn't work. Let's talk about some of the good stuff. For example, this game is really fucking fun. There were two phases to my Outriders demo experience. The first was when I played solo. I was running the Devastator, who is this in-your-face tank-style guy who can surround himself with rock to tank damage and teleport across the battlefield and cast earthquakes everywhere and all that good stuff. Now, when you first drop into the battlefield and get rolling, the first thing you see is all this cover. And we've all played Gears of War and The Division, etc. We know that when we see cover and there's a snap to cover system in place, that we should use the cover, so that's what I did. I played most of that playthrough from behind cover, coming out only when my abilities were off cooldown and I could blow something up, and then I'd go back behind cover. I was enjoying myself at this point, but I wasn't having a ball. I was like, yeah, this is fine. Then I ran with two mates, and I ran the Pyromancer, who just AoEs everything down, and one of my mates ran the Trickster, who I'd never seen before, this Trickster class, and I still remember laughing out loud with excitement when I saw this ability for the first time. This is the Trickster's time bubble, which slows everything down so enemies are just ripe to be minced, and the Trickster has spectral blades that literally unsheaths enemies' skin and turns them into skeletons, and when they die, their skeletal remains go floating through the time bubble in this glorious, like, Terminator 2 Judgment Day inspired carnage. I was just like, this is awesome. That moment was really the start of me realizing just how well designed most of these classes are and how well each of them synergize with each other. When we realized how strong that time bubble was, we began chaining together our abilities, coordinating with each other when we knew enemies were about to spawn so we could round up as many as possible and just dissolve them. Each class is able to contribute to this in their own way, from the Devastator, who can tank bullets and send them hurling back, to the Pyromancer, who can make living bombs out of targets, to the Technomancer, who can drop a wave of artillery over an area, to the Trickster, who can teleport behind targets and assassinate them. It was during these play sessions with my mates that I realized that this isn't actually a cover shooter. The cover isn't for you, it's for the enemies. Your job is just to go ham, chaining together abilities and gunfire to do as much damage as possible, because each class is healed in some way by doing damage. This realization made the level design all the more puzzling for me. See, the level design in this game is bad. It's so inorganic, so staged, so fake. It really does look like the old Gears of War levels from like the Xbox 360 era. They look like such video game levels, where modern cover-based shooters like The Division or even recent Gears of War games have found ways to provide lots of cover without their levels looking like they were built using consumer-grade level editors. I'm interested to see how this evolves as we access more areas of the game, but right now, this is definitely a big sticking point. More broadly, gunplay is fine, it's not amazing. The Division's weapons feel better, Gears of War's weapons feel better, Destiny's weapons feel worlds better. Outriders' weapons get the job done. I'm not talking about specific weapon design, by the way, which can get kind of weird and crazy looking. I'm talking about the fundamentals, like sound design, recoil, aim assist, feedback, enemy ragdolling, etc. Yes, you can give opponents with a shotgun here, and it's a nice thrill, but you're playing Outriders for its abilities first and its gunplay second. The other reason you'd be playing it is for its gear. Now, I'm a little blown away by how well Outriders is nailing the most critical aspect of the looter-shooter genre, the loot. And it's doing it on a timeline that other games would never dream of implementing. So what do I mean by that? If you think about your time with loot-based games, Destiny, The Division, Anthem, Avengers, whatever, one constant is that you never have to engage the loot game until after the campaign is finished. Yes, you look at the numbers and the arrows and you equip the new Hulk ribcage if the numbers are better than your old Hulk ribcage. Can't believe that they did that, by the way. Anyway, maybe you equip a shotgun instead of a sniper rifle, whatever, but that's really as sophisticated as loot gets in most of these looters during the campaign. All the good stuff, the build diversity, the mods, the synergies between your abilities, weapons, and armor, you essentially park all of that until you hit the end game, when you begin making more interesting decisions, finessing builds, etc. Outriders is like, fuck that. Immediately, you are getting items with perks that are just crazy. Like, hey, here's a perk that lets you use your most powerful ability twice as often. It's not like 3% more often, or 5% chance to proc double damage or some shit like you'd expect from every other game. It's like, nope, just use it twice as often, have fun. I played all 4 classes during the demo, and for each of them, I found these sorts of items that were radically changing my playstyle. Immediately, I was choosing to forego certain weapon upgrades because I was eager to hold on to the weapon bonuses in my old weapons. I was swapping my skills around because I got a new vest that made one of my abilities way more powerful. This would then push me into a completely different style of play than I would have otherwise had the power to sustain. See, I think a lot of people look at the looter shooter genre and they immediately dismiss it because they rightly assume that they're going to go through the motions on a phoned-in campaign, and the core promise of that genre, the loot, isn't really available to them unless they're willing to grind for it at the end game. The most compelling aspect of Outriders to me is that it looks to be the first looter shooter where this isn't true. If all of this holds for the final release of the game, it looks like those who play the game for the campaign will still be able to experience an engaging loot game. Not just numbers going up for the sake of it, but interesting items with interesting perks, allowing you to make interesting build decisions, and I'm totally down for that. And related to this is the power fantasy. Now again, this genre specifically makes you feel super weak and ineffective during the leveling process because it wants to juxtapose that with the end game. When your build comes online and you can start playing the game as it's meant to be played, in inverted commas. This is a genre that gatekeeps power, opening that gate to only the select few willing to push through the worst, most grindy aspects of the looter shooter model. Within a few minutes of playing Outriders, I was already feeling more powerful than I'd ever felt in any looter, except for maybe like Warframe, because shit gets pretty crazy there. I was immediately just tearing shit up, and that felt good. From what I can tell, you don't need to play 60 hours of Outriders to get to the good gear. You don't need to grind 100 hours of Outriders to feel powerful. You don't need to wait to find the fun. You're just right there, and given how many people refuse to engage this genre because of all the throttling that goes on, I think Outriders has a real shot of winning over some people who never thought they'd suit up for another looter. One of the biggest criticisms leveled at the game at this point is that it feels kind of budget, and yeah, I totally agree with that. It comes through in the stilted animations, the janky visuals, the airiness of the gunplay. Clearly, this is not the same production values as Destiny or whatever, but I think it's super important to remember that it's not trying to be. One of the reasons that I have been interested in this game is because it's not trying to follow many of the trends that have destabilized or ruined this genre. As an example, there's no PvP. Ask any PvE-focused Destiny or Division fan about their thoughts on how the PvP side of their game has influenced the PvE side. They will not have nice things to say. Outriders is just sidestepping all of that. The game is not a live service, though it does require an internet connection to play, which kind of sucks. Still, Outriders doesn't feel like a game where parts of it are being held back to sell you season passes or DLC later on. I mean, you can walk up to this kiosk thing at any time and change your in-game appearance. Bungie is about to add transmog to their game after years of people begging for it, and guess what? It's tied to real-world currency. Yeah, you can do it for free, but you can also pay for it, which surely means that we're going to be getting some bullshit restrictions imposed on this feature to get us spending. Outriders is like, no microtransactions, no DLC, just a complete game. The other thing I'll say, and it's a bit of a weird comment to make, but this team has really been super transparent with their comms about this game. They've really clearly outlined what to expect from the campaign, putting it at around 35 hours. They've released this 13-minute video that just spelled out exactly how the endgame works, talking about endgame expeditions and the crafting and all sorts of stuff. Like, remember Anthem when it launched? BioWare was deathly silent when anyone asked them what the endgame was about. And obviously that was because there was no endgame. Same thing happened with The Division when it launched, and same thing happened with Destiny. All of these games did this. Outriders is not doing this. It's super clear and transparent, and so long as all of that doesn't turn out to be lies, I think it could be a great case study for how to speak to an audience in the way that they want to be spoken to. Now, as I said at the start, I'm not here to tell you that Outriders is great. This is a demo. It's a small slice of the game. We have to see how it lands. But so far, it's ticking boxes for me. I'm not expecting it to replace my deep, destabilizing Destiny addiction, because again, the game is not trying to do that. It's just trying to be a fun game that you play for a while and then you put it down. From what I've experienced, I think People Can Fly are on track to deliver, and I'm genuinely looking forward to the launch. This video is brought to you by the Inno 3D range of RTX 30 series GPUs, and if you haven't looked into how much of a leap this next generation of cards are, then you really should. Put simply, this next generation of NVIDIA GPUs are to PCs what the PS5 and Xbox Series X are to consoles. They make 4K gaming actually possible, where before you had to turn down too many of your settings to keep your frame rate up. More importantly, they also make ray tracing a reality, something that was just beyond the reach of the previous generation of cards, since the performance cost was typically too damn high. If you're not familiar with ray tracing, it's a vastly better and more realistic way of producing lighting in games. Things like reflections on metals or glass or on puddles on the street. Before, developers had to manually manipulate light, which was both time intensive for them and never as authentic as it could be. With ray tracing, light is simulated through an algorithm, meaning it bounces and reflects in more ways than was possible before. Scenes in games like Watch Dogs Legion and Cyberpunk 2077 are utterly transformed through this sort of tech, and it's hard to go back once you've experienced it. The 30 series cards make ray tracing possible through not only raw processing power, but through something called DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling. It's sort of hard to explain, but the long and the short of it is that it uses your GPU processing power more efficiently, giving you more headroom to enable more graphical settings, including stuff like ray tracing. I played Control with DLSS enabled, and it literally doubled my frame rate when I had ray tracing turned on. If you haven't got your hands on a 30 series card yet, then I recommend checking out the Inno 3D iChill lineup, which is what I use. It comes with a side rotor fan for extra cooling, programmable RGB so it can match your rig, ultra thin cooling fins for even more cooling, and a solid backplate to increase the surface area for memory and component cooling. Thanks to NVIDIA and Inno 3D for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching it. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so I know to do better for next time. If you enjoyed yourself, consider subscribing, and if you really enjoyed yourself, maybe consider hitting that notification bell so you never miss a video. You can see my patrons here on the left. They're awesome. They're amazing. If you want to join them, check out my Patreon page. Thank you again. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.